Welcome, everyone, to the Stockbridge Library's online poetry series. Our theme this season is Sparks in the Dark. This program is led by John Gillespie, poetry fan extraordinaire. John, at the time he started this series for the Stockbridge Library, he was the president of the Board of Trustees. He has since ended his service in that capacity and moved to Maine, but he's still running the program for us. John, thank you very much. And today we are lucky to have with us poet Carla Panciera. She has written a collection of short stories called Bewildered that received the 2013 Grace Paley Short Fiction Award from the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. Her short stories have also appeared in the New England Review, Clackamas Review, Slice, as well as a few other publications. And her short story, The Kind of People Who Look at Art, was chosen by Juno Diaz as a distinguished story in the Best American Short Stories in 2017. And Carla was the James E. Kilgore Scholar in Nonfiction at the Breadloaf Writers Conference, and she is a recipient of an individual artist grant in creative nonfiction from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. And her newest book, Barnflower, a Rhode Island farm memoir, came out last year. She also has two collections of poetry, one of the Similores and No Day, No Dusk, No Love. Her poetry has appeared in numerous publications, including Poetry, Rhino, and the Los Angeles Review. Carla, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll turn the program over to you and to John.
Thank you.
Yeah, Wendy, thank you for the library for hosting and for long-standing program. It really is a joy every week. Yeah, Carl, let's start. We start the same way every week. So what did the theme of igniting sparks in the dark mean for you?
Okay, I had to give this some thought because I think my poetry by its nature is pretty dark, and I've had some conversations with some of the poets in this particular Zoom about that. So when I read through the mission statement, there's partly the idea that poetry inspires us to act, and I don't think I'm that poet unless by acting people go bird watching or go for walks. That was that's maybe how I can motivate you. But then the other part of it is, how does poetry inspire us to move forward? And I'm thinking from the dark to the light. And I guess that's where my poetry comes in. I think that's probably how I would characterize it. The editors of the Cider Press Review, which published my first collection of poetry, when they were asked what kinds of poetry they published, the way they described my poetry is intimate and deeply personal. So it's not political. It's not that isn't who I am. And I thought everybody wrote just personal poetry. I didn't realize it was any other kind of poetry. So what I decided to do today is I'm 61. I'm in this new decade. It's a time of, some kind of personal losses, the accumulation of loss. And I would like to tell people who don't know me out there, I do have a sense of humor, but you're not probably going to hear it today. So you're not going to hear it in poetry. Read some of my fiction or nonfiction. So I thought, okay, so what I'd like to do is start out with 3 poems that sort of capture the darkness that I'm trying to move forward from, because I do think that that is one of the uses for poetry in my life, both when I read it and when I write it, to that collective experience that you have. We've experienced grief or loss or whatever, or awe, whatever those feelings are. And then poetry sort of helps me as a poet move through it. And hopefully as a reader, you move through some of those times as well.
So is it going to be from the farm memoir? Because that's already intrigued me.
If I have a few minutes at the end, I can definitely read from.
No, I'm joking. I think Wendy knows, and a few other people. I have sometimes a little crazy sense of humor. So I was just wondering if there are like any talking ducks in your poems, or other animals that were sharing their life stories. Liz, I see, is writing copious notes now for for her presentation in a few weeks. No, listen, I love language and the words. And for those of you who don't know, the farm she grew up on, the sign is on the door, Tumalum Farm. So yeah, if you have time at the end, but not required. It's just I thought it was
Mm.
you writing something from some long-term memories. I think that's pretty nice.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really exciting to have that book out in the world. It's a really important book to me. And I do have cow poems, but the couple that are happy are so long, and then the other ones are
Oh boy.
grim. So
Kathy, no cow poems from you. I've got you on a short leash. No cow poems.
Kathy, do you write cow poems?
No, she doesn't. I'm joking. Kathy's been on the show so many times. I feel like, yeah, she doesn't know cow poems. Carla, go ahead. That's the end of our humor part of the program. Now
Yeah,
we're going
it's
to
all
get
over now. It's all downhill, people.
yeah, it's downhill, serious poetry, dark to the light. Yeah.
Okay, so I think as part of turning 60 and being in this age group is you're more aware of aging, and not just for yourself, but for those around you. So I'm going to start with a poem called To Modify, to Qualify, to Mollify. Days after her first chemo, Kathy set stones on the table. Aoi, jasper, Mozambique garnet, Mina Maria turquoise. I could stay here all day with the names of things, especially printed in her perfect letters. She holds the gems like prosthetic eyeballs, like the shells of songbirds, the kind that make you look up to see where they've fallen from. It rains biblically, primitively, heroically. Tornado warnings. Tree limbs peeled off like evening gloves tossed aside for chambermaids. The cat climbs on to Kathy's lap and arranges itself like an infant, glances back at me with blue eyes, possessively, tauntingly. The pretty plume agate's thunder egg matrix is a landscape. See the mountains, Kathy says? It rises from a lake. And the clouds, I say, cirrus. When I get home, the day has finally cleared. The sky remorselessly blue above puddle evidence of past lives. Along the border of my yard, something lopes. Coyote, Canis latrans, brush wolf, American jackal. Where does anything come from? Of course, the answer is it doesn't matter. And still, we have to find something to call it. Precious thing, where are you off to? What will you become? We say, covetously, reverentially, eyeing or fingering its mass. I just will say that Kathy got the all clear yesterday from her oncologist, so it does have a happy ending. The second part of my life that's in flux is I have 3 daughters. They're right now 23, 24, 25. So you can imagine they're little.
Well, you stopped the streak. Shouldn't they be
I
like
know, I know.
Well, every year, whether you wanted to or not. Yeah, there you
well,
go.
yeah. And I was old when it got started, older, so I wrapped it
Well,
up.
celebrate your anniversary with a new baby.
But they're grown up to wonderful women. And but
Wow.
again, you're kind of thinking back about that time in your life that when you're in it, you think it's never going to end, right? Okay, so this is a poem called When We Come Without Our Daughters and Still Leave Them Behind.
Are they close? Are the 3 close because of age?
You know what my pediatrician said when they were little and he asked about their relationship? He said, oh, siblings, profound love and profound hate. And, I think that's true. I mean, they do definitely love each other, but they don't fight with anybody the way they fight with one another. And I want passionate women. I want willful, passionate, somebody makes you angry. Get in there, girl. Let them know how you feel. So, that plays out here every once in a while.
Yeah,
but
you made 3 of them. Yeah, there you go.
But they're wonderful. They're great kids.
Yeah, great.
Young women. All right, so this is called When We Come Without Our Daughters and Still Leave Them Behind. When we leave the campground, we won't interrupt their trek through the nature path, identifying Indian paintbrush, their single file determination, their bent heads, or their search for marshmallow sticks in the pines beside our site. They might be coming any moment into the clearing to unfold their chairs around the fire. One might appear cupping a red newt in her palm, another a shredded elbow. Their hair unbrushed for days, their pierced ears newly healed. On the picnic table, a centerpiece of moth wing, snakeskin. But there will be no way to meet them, no way to gather up those girls who reek of bug spray and smoke. Instead, we'll leave them here, ignoring us as we drive by the river, where they wait, nets poised, for crayfish, with the nature center guide, their summer crush. We'll want to stop, of course, to ask what they will find, fearing one or another's heartache. But we will think we have no time to stop, or plenty. We will have left one water shoe behind. Thanks. Okay, and then this is the last loss one. And then I'll arc forward. My mother died, and within 6 months, my husband's parents died. So of course, we have those kinds of losses in our life too. So I'm going to read a poem called "The Spoon." From the second house we've emptied this year, my husband sorts metal into piles, gutter elbows, drill bits, copper pipe. All our parents are dead now. I have learned what I do not want to know. This hot summer is not aberration, it's precursor. I sit before the fan, barricade myself with laundry baskets so the dog can't get too close, cover my feet with her unthinkable fur. My husband puts a tarnished spoon on the table. Silver, he says, as if this will lift a curtain like a breeze, as if suddenly we will walk barefoot through the frost. But this spoon is another item of which we must now dispose. This legacy of stuff as stultifying as August. Cardboard shirt boxes, Balik china, electrical cords taped with electrical tape, body bags of t-shirts and socks. But no, never again. My mother bending over a word search or leaving talc footprints across the carpet after her bath. What does my husband imagine I will do with this spoon? How can it possibly matter? If you were a precious metal mined from the earth's crust, is this what you would choose to be? I ask the spoon, the mute spoon, this spoon with its history of polishing, tarnishing of lips and tongues, this spoon which reflects no light, registers neither desire nor regret, what is coming, what is already gone.
I like it that you gave the spoon an identity. That the spoon was your, you could have a conversation with the spoon in the kitchen.
Yeah, take some stuff out on it, which is safe, right? This is much safer.
It wasn't charged before you started beating on it, and then it lost its luster. Yeah,
right. So then, the question becomes sort of like, where is the light? And I think, for a poet, for a writer, it's partially just getting things on paper, right? That's what we do, and that's why we do it. And I think calling up details that remind us that time is not a linear thing, right? The present is filled with the past and filled with the future. And I don't know if that's comforting or not. It just is what it is. But it is nice when you start, this happened in my memoir, especially when you start revisiting these places where you remember people and these things that you remember about them. So that does give me some light. So I'm going to read another poem about my mother. It's called Offertorium. Mom, I said once, my sneaker's full of blood. In those days, it was always blood. Mice she trapped in cupboards, the bluefish her brothers caught at the lighthouse and brought her to gut. One Christmas, she gave me a spoon ring, a red Panasonic Dynamite 8-track, Northern Isle sweaters with matching dickies. No one ever knew what to buy her. Later, we threw out a lot of Yankee candles, souvenir potholders. She always knew a priest for holy water and palms. I miss the Mass in Latin, she told me. This struck me because she let everything else go. What I loved? Finding her the first figs of the season and how she ate them all at once and made herself sick. I have a scar on my ankle from something she told me not to do. I have her wedding ring, the same veins in my hands. Nights that last year, I blessed her with the holy water, a joke we shared. I went to Mass with my sisters when I was 5 because they promised me donuts. They knew, didn't they, my sisters, what she did when we left the house. 100 acres, and our mother locked in the bathroom with a pack of Winstons. Her hair, her breath, the shoulder of her sweater, all the holes and the spaces and the blood in her reeking. But I came home anyway to breathe next to her. I closed the bathroom window, kept the smoke in.
Your mother was a character.
Yeah, my mother was a real character. She was the kind of person who was undaunted by huge crowds and huge amounts of food. She fed not only 75 people on Christmas Eve, she fed her eye doctor, her dentist, all of the employees at the town hall of Westerly, Rhode Island, where I grew up, some of the employees from the school department in Westerly. She was just sent food out like, I don't know, leaflets. Okay. And so, it's funny that you asked about my daughters earlier, and I said, I like to see girls with a little fight in them. So I spent almost 30 years of my life as a teacher. I taught high school English and in public schools, and I taught AP Lit as part of my career. And I had a group of, one year, it's weird, it's never happened. I had 16 girls in class and no boys. I don't know
Wow.
if that happened. It was one of the most moving years of my career. And I had a new appreciation for single sex education when it was over. But the girls came in kind of tentative. So their writing was tentative, their discussion was tentative. And I was like, girls, you have to break some rules. You have to know what rules to break, but you have to go out and break some. So we did this little thing on Mondays. They would come in and I would say to them, okay, tell me what rules you broke this weekend. And so most of what you'll hear when it gets to fantasy, but most of what you hear here is stuff that they legitimately did. Okay, then it'll get a little weird at the end, and you know that that's not true. So the name of this poem is, and again, I think, the lightness, leading that purposeful life. I had a great career. I loved that career. Okay, so this is called, for homework, I told 16 girls to break some rules. I should have seen it coming when they brewed tea in class on Fridays, when they plugged too many kettles in at once, scorned the use of sugar, ignored the warning bell, stayed in the library after hours, pilfered string beans from the salad bar at Whole Foods, walked 1 kilometer of a 5K and wore the t-shirt anyway. The substitute teacher could not stop them from dancing. When poems moved them, they cheered, cried, left the room without asking. Later, they mocked archetypes, especially those representing spring. One weekend, thirsty, adrift, they helped themselves to lemonade and cookies in the lobby of Salem's Hawthorne Hotel. That winter, they handed each other with invisible ink, materialized first in line for grand openings, for concerts on school nights. By choice, they became bad listeners. We can't possibly be expected to raise our hands. One teacher sent an anonymous email comparing them to a man who snuck into Yellowstone and was killed by a hot spring. Anonymous, except the girls knew who sent it, memorized his address, nursed a shared resentment for metaphors not of their making.
Glad I wasn't the substitute teacher for that class.
They broke the radiator, the knuckleheads dancing around.
Hey, Carla, we have we have a little break kind of near the midpoint of the show
Okay.
to allow the audience to ask some questions or provide some comments. Callie, if you have personal information about Carla, now's the time to get it out here onto the platform. We have to do serious fact checking. So only kidding. Yeah, I'm in a good mood today. So this is nice. And even though it's raining again in Maine, which is totally nuts, but so anybody want to unmute and comments, questions?
Carla, I'll comment about your mom. I love spending nights talking to your mom. In fact, one night we were there late, about, I don't know, 9:30 at night, and Patty came down from upstairs and she wondered, what is going on down here? I hear all these voices and it's like 9:30 at night. We were just talking about whatever we talked about. A lot of it had to do with cooking. Your mom always talked about going to Market Basket and getting lobsters when she came up to visit. She was working on the 7 fishes, right?
Yeah.
She was saving.
Except she made 9. She made 9.
Yeah, she was saving things away in the freezer. One day we came and she had made these pork chops and they were too spicy. And so she decided, Jerry's coming to pick them up. But if you want to have a couple, go ahead, you can help yourself. But he's going to come pick them up because we can't eat them. It's too spicy. And soon after, Jerry came by and he picked up his pork chops. And you're right. I mean, there was always something on the stove or on the counter or coming out of the freezer. Or she was just the penultimate cook. She was such a great lady. We love spending time with her in the evenings, just chatting about everything. It was
Thanks, Frank.
great memories.
Thanks. Frank is one of my Panciera cousins, Panciera side of the family. But he got fed too. He fed both sides of the family.
Carla, I was cracking up when you read the lemonade and cookies line out of the poem about your students, because I'm prone to occasionally dropping into the Hawthorne to snitch a cup of coffee out of the whole display that they have going on for their guests.
Yeah, that's a true story. I think they drank tea, but I couldn't put tea in there. I had to put the lemonade. But yeah, 3 of them went in and did that as their assignment.
Anybody else?
I love the way you play with the naming in that first poem, I think it was, with the different kinds of gemstones, the one about your friend Kathy. When you said Kathy, it startled me for a moment since that's my name. But I just wondered if you did that a lot or if that's specific to that poem, because I enjoyed that.
Naming specific things like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm going to read a poem next about this. I did this thing called the poetry stand with my students. So we would set up, in Salem or Newburyport or whatever, and people would order poems from them and they would write them on the spot for free. And I felt bad that being a writer, when you're a teacher and you are a writer, you don't normally ask your students to do anything you haven't done before, but I had not done that. So I'd been writing prose for years and years and years, and I wanted to get back into writing poetry. And I decided I'm going to go ask people for what kind of poem do you want? What poem do you want from me? And I'm going to write that. And that actually, one of the girls from that AP class requested that poem about rule breaking. And what that led to is me doing a lot more research than I had done before. And then you do find these amazing names for things. So I'm doing this whole, I don't know what they are, this other collection that I'm working on about like body parts and like parts of the body. And that's been kind of fun to do. So yeah, I think a little bit more now in my poetry, I'm looking for some specifics like that. But those were actual stones that Kathy had laid out on her table. And I just was hurrying up, writing down names while she was talking.
Nice. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
So Carla, I mean, you spent a bunch of time in kind of the prose world. What made you, do you kind of flip back and forth between prose and poetry? Tell us a little bit about that. Not everybody comes to our program with that background.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it necessarily. One of the reasons I do it is because I'm not good at sort of follow through. So if I get stuck and I've been, my fiction bores me for a little bit, then I'll go to poetry. It's kind of nice to have that. But yeah, I mean, I wanted to be a fiction writer. I went to the University of New Hampshire to write fiction. Those are the classes I took. Those are the literature classes I took. And I really struggled to write fiction. And my senior year, my friend Joe said, will you just enjoy yourself and take a poetry class? And I thought, I don't know anything about writing poetry. And I took it and I loved it. And then I went to grad school for poetry. And I don't know. I just, like, right now I started writing prose again, just to allow, I'm working on a novel. I've like doing some edits on some short stories. It just sometimes I just feel like I don't want to write prose anymore. And I'm so lucky I have something else to do, I guess, and vice versa.
Yeah. That reminded me of the, what do you call it? The Mounds commercial. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't.
Yeah,
Mama
right.
Joy has nuts and Mounds don't. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah. Yeah. It goes back to back to my Fred Flintstone era, having sugar as my main dietary element. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great. No, it's great that you have some options to kind of go back and forth with. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a little strange. I mean, like when I'm with my poet friends, they're so steeped in the world of poetry. So they know editors and they know different magazines and what's going on in the poetry world. I don't really know that stuff. And then when I'm with my fiction writer friends, they're like, oh, so-and-so just sold a book to so-and-so. It's like this agent, and I don't know what the hell they're talking about. And so I do in a way feel a little bit like I'm on the surface of both worlds. And, again, that's not a bad thing. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah. No, it's great. So, yeah, share some more of your work with us, please.
Okay, so again, this is a poem that it was a friend of mine requested. She was in a tough marriage and she wanted a poem about a way out. And again, I think it's probably one of my light poems, whatever. Okay, it's called Smart Girls Always Have a Plan. If only my teachers had told me math is movement trying to express itself. If they had shown me the Incan quipu, llama hair fanned out like a sun in kinesthetic base tens, I'm listening. Math, after all, is one letter removed from stories of the gods. But those algorithmic days, I coveted cloud paths, the thoughtless sweep of the janitor's broom. If someone had mentioned Galileo, who believed the universe could be read in shapes, who said, we wander a dark labyrinth without these, reading, I understood, labyrinths. Which brings me to Ariadne. Didn't everyone assume it was impossible to get out of that thing alive? Even the hero's faithless father prepared himself for a namesake sea. But Ariadne was like those high school calculus queens. So many of us saw chicken scratch, a traitorous alphabet, but those girls intuited north. And maybe after all her figuring, Ariadne was abandoned by her love. Or maybe the other version is true, that grief itself left the fatal sails unfurled. This is why, of course, some people prefer mathematics. They desire unicursal endings. I prefer a world, both art and science, full of possibilities I might discover. One trail of longing, another of strength.
Very nice. Lots of stories.
Thanks. Okay. This is a daughter poem. It's a little bit, those kind of tough adolescent years begin. I think it has a little positive, I hope it has a little positive spin on it. So one of my daughters puts those air fresheners in her car, and I get an instant migraine when I smell anything like that, right? So this is an ode to that. It's called "In the Car She Drives, the Air is Always Freshened." A cardboard pine tree of Caribbean colada swings from the rearview mirror. The mirror in which my daughter considers whether she needs eyelash extensions, teeth whitening, whether she needs her eyebrows threaded. Onto the vents, she's clipped mini clothespins of catching rays. Somewhere, fresh cotton has lodged itself to participate in the olfactory assault. When I come home and ask why the car has to smell like a corny souvenir shop, she says, disgusted, "Corny? What does that even mean?" I stumble towards the medicine cabinet for anything to ward off the migraine the combined toxins stoke over my left eyebrow, which does need threading, but which, to my daughter's horror, I pluck, as if I have just finished following behind the mules breaking sod in Nebraska territory. Okay, I manage, like a perfume factory, like a Glade collision on the interstate, like the senior center ladies' lunch, like some coked up, hybrid-assed funeral arrangements from hell. I think we are about to have it now. The "you don't get me," because if you did, you'd see what part of our family's blanked upness I am trying to mask blowout. Instead, she turns from where she is rummaging through a drawer of aux cords, earbuds, keys, and says, "Hybrid-assed?" Then she is laughing at me, not with me. But I know we will be fine because my polluted head hurts so bad that when I try to focus on her, I see not one, but two of her beautiful selves searching. Okay. So I'm going to read a brand new poem. I haven't read this aloud before, but I think it's inspiration. Oh, the inspiration for this poem is in here, is in this Zoom. Teresa, coming at you, baby.
Oh boy.
It's called Polytheism. Teresa texted, "I have a crowing hen." Is that possible? I wondered, though I got it. Why a hen would want to crow, because joy. A crop full of grubs and a dust bath in the peony patch, a syrinx at one end, an egg popping vent at the other. Bliss that makes possible an assembly line fueled solely by light. Danielle sent me a text full of errors, then apologized. "I'm distracted because I'm throwing embryos." Tossing out? Like an ancient system of beliefs? Or like bread crusts to pigeons? Like a few perfect notes no one expects her to hit? Here I'm going to skip the part where the crowing hen developed tail feathers or how autocorrect can destroy a fantasy. And by glossing over, I admit, the bitter disappointments in anyone's life. Is it okay for a poem about joy to pass by pain? The way, say, a driver passes a skunk partially paralyzed on the highway and pretends the creature didn't make eye contact? Or the way a runner passes on a lip of pond ice, a mallard clasped beneath the talons of a redtail. The hawk pauses. The duck blinks, ashamed to be caught not by the raptor, but by a witness to this final intimacy. I want you to know, world, your joy, even the way, especially the way you dole it out to others, is not lost on me. Any joy is incantation. Teresa's hens are either iridescent or bouffant-esque. They come when she knocks her ring against a jar of mealworms. In the morning, Danielle drives to work along the Charles River as the spine of Boston awakens, signaling, take this light, window by window, pane by pane by pane.
Right. Now we'll go to Teresa live. No, you're kidding. No, that duck being caught by a witness, very powerful.
That's on one of my morning walks. That's what I'm saying. That's the only kind of action I can maybe inspire with my poems, but it's amazing what I see on my morning walks and how a lot of that ends up in a poem when I get home or
Great.
later on.
That's great.
All right, should I read more?
Yeah, no, keep going. Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a very quiet audience today, except for Frank. So I'm hoping I can rev. Well, we had Callie too. I'm hoping, and Kathy. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yes. All right, I'm gonna. So this is I have a third collection of poetry that's out making the rounds, trying to find a home, and this is the last poem in that. So the poems that most of the poems you heard are, well, not all of them, but some of them, the darker ones, are in that collection. But this is how I end it. It's called Despite Everything. It was the summer an eagle flew over Steve's house, just as we stood outside to say goodbye. The summer, sleek, oily bear cubs rolled through the mulch at John's. 4 deer grazed in the field, and a turkey pair bookended their brood in a neighbor's driveway. The groundhog had groundhogs, and they nibbled clover, dug holes into the garden. Coyotes big as wolves attacked a dog. Outside the gate, a garter snake lunged at Guess, but the feral cat let us draw close enough to see his broken teeth. Hummingbirds on the rose of Sharon, the same fat toad on the driveway. We took nothing as a sign. Not the white sharks off the coast, not the hornet's nest that clogged the screech owl house. The apple trees finally blossomed. Everything was hungry or sated, hunting or fat, pink-mouthed, sugared, a small world balanced out the corner of our eye. I'm going to try to find a cow poem or a farm poem. Oh, also, I have a I don't want to like go back down the dark thing, but I'm going to read you the first poem that I ever had published. So as I said, senior year in the fall, UNH, took a poetry class. Maybe the second or third poem I wrote was this poem called Selling Cows. And it's the only poem I've ever had that, and sounds so cheesy, but I did dream the line, and it's not even an amazing line. My father is selling his cows. And then I went to the library that night and I wrote it. And it's been through many revisions. But ultimately it appeared in Yankee Magazine. It's the only time in my life that one of my poems appeared in a magazine that people in my life actually read. And it was like my cousin's husband was standing in line at the grocery store and he picked up Yankee and he was flipping through it and he's like, oh my God, I know this person. I thought, okay, that's the only time it's ever going to happen. You can publish 10,000 poems and most people don't pick up these lovely small journals, right? Other poets maybe. So this is called Selling Cows. My father is selling his cows. He sends them away like postcards, black and white, then black again, having a wonderful time. He has had them forever. These cows are other cows, grandmother cows and great-grandmother cows, but now he wants to plant flowers in the milk cans instead. Sleep until noon, even wear sneakers. He might go to Italy. So he sends the last one away in a truck, rocking like a cradle with a fat baby in it, and he stands in the driveway until he is only a shadow against pastures growing darker, undisturbed.
How old were you when he let go of his cows?
I was 26, 27. Yeah, he sold the land first. And no, he sold the cows and then he sold the land. But within 6 months of him, not even selling the cows, the land was completely transformed. The stone walls disappeared because the grass grew so quickly and raccoons moved into the backyard. It was crazy. It was crazy how the land reclaimed itself once the cows were off of it. So it was a very changed landscape. And then we sold the farm and moved off of it. So
And how long had the family had the dairy farm?
my grandparents bought the farm in 1911. My grandparents and Frank's grandparents, they bought the farm in 1911. They came to, our grandfather was a stone cutter and carver, and he worked in the granite quarries in Westerly. Western Rhode Island is very famous for its granite quarries. And they were living in Connecticut for a little bit when they first settled, and then they bought this farm. It was 100 acres. And my grandfather and his brother married sisters from a different part of the Dolomite region in northern Italy. And my Uncle Mike was a blacksmith, so he also worked at the quarries. And then my grandmother and her sister basically ran the farm. They did all the animal care. They did a lot of the chores while the men were working. And then my dad and one of my uncles did the milk route. And so they would take the horse and buggy and they would go around town. And they stopped the one-room schoolhouse was about a half a mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile from the laneway where the farm was. So they would hop off, go to school, and the horse would walk back home by itself. And my grandmother would be waiting at the end of the laneway, and she'd unharness the horse and put the horse away for the day. So,
Wow.
but yeah, so they had it. My dad was born in 1911. He moved there when he was 3 months old or something.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice story.
Any questions, anybody? It's a lot of poetry.
Yeah, let's have another little couple minutes if people want to comment or question. You don't have to. I think most poets enjoy it because it's, I think part of this program is a conversation with poetry, not just poetry. So if anybody has any questions or comments, if not, we'll keep going on.
I have a question for Carla. I'm not really sure exactly how to word it, but I'm thinking of where the overlap is in your poetry and your fiction, whether it's in your inspiration, to go towards either genre, or what do you see similar in the tools you use for both? Sound, rhythm, like what, you're working mostly in image. Just curious about the overlap.
Yeah, that's a good question. I probably overwrite stories because I get really into the language. And thankfully, my husband is a really excellent editor. He's also a writer, and he is not afraid to tear something apart and say, look at this sentence now. Let's look at this sentence. It's going crazy. It's like 5 lines long. And I'm like, it's such a nice word, such a nice phrase. So I think that, the poet who loves language kind of forgets that people, when they're reading short fiction, want a story, like what, and this is Dennis's comment all the time to me. He's like, but what is happening in this story? Nothing's happening in this story. I'm like, isn't it pretty though? So I think that's an overlap in it. I think thematically they're not that connected. I think in poetry, I love like the natural world, and that is really my inspiration. And I don't do a lot with that. I do a lot more personal relationships in my fiction, especially between women characters. I really like exploring that. So I don't really do a lot of that in my poetry. But I do think my poetry, I think it has I hope it has a little bit of a narrative thread that you can sort of follow from one part to the next. I don't really understand full-blown lyric experimental poetry. That's not anything I've ever been really comfortable with. So I do always love a narrative thread. And when I have to give feedback to a poet, I always say, okay, let me tell you what I think is going on in this poem. And I kind of tell the story of the poem. So maybe that's how they interact as well, overlap.
Thanks. I agree with you too. Sometimes I get very lost and I want to know, where am I in the poem? Where am I moving towards? Where's the map of the poem taking me? But I just wanted to say, most people who try to write poetry and fiction and memoir and all these things you do so well cannot do it as well as you. So I just wanted to thank you for all of your words, because all of it's wonderful, and that's rare.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah.
Carla, when did you begin to know that you loved words?
Oh, from the beginning of my life. I remember one time with my friends, we were talking about, okay, Collie, we've had this conversation. Collie and I exchanged like who gets connections every day if you play the New York Times connections. But we have these, we're with these other two poets, and we have these detailed discussions about word relationships that maybe only poets can understand. But I remember one time we were looking at prepositions in English class, and the teacher was explaining to us that but is a synonym for except. And I thought, like, a very, very bright, scientific minded friend. And she's like, I don't get it. I've never heard that. And I remember just being so, how could you never have heard that? But, but for this, we would be wealthy people or whatever it is, and so I've just always, I hated grammar lessons because I thought, how do people not understand this? How do they not hear this already? Right. So yeah, I guess it was one of those things. And I mean, my parents were both great storytellers. And they read, like my dad read the newspaper, read trade magazines, my mother read romance novels or whatever, but it wasn't like I felt a bit freakish in my own family. I mean, my sisters are here, they can attest.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where it came from, and I'm happy that I have it, but yeah, words like, it's kind of to Kathy's question. One of the great things about researching poetry is all of a sudden you don't have just those same words you keep coming back to. Like the number of times I've used the word ancient in my poetry is disgusting, right? But now I have like, oh, Mozambique jasper, that's cool. I'm gonna use that, right?
Yeah,
That's great.
thank you.
Thanks,
So
Tom.
about 10 more minutes. So you want to share a few more of your work?
Sure. I'm gonna try to get again something a little lighter. Oh, so I think my daughter was on. One of my daughters is on here.
How do you say her name?
Athea.
Athea, okay.
Yep. And I'm gonna read a poem that I wrote for her. I wrote the other poem about the car and the air fresheners. It's for my youngest daughter, Justina. But this is called 4 Years Old, The Only Whale You Know, Beluga. You were what we were told might never be, the beluga breaching in the blanched full moon of my belly. Afraid to sleep, I sat up late and read the Tibetan book of child rearing, which warned a mother's nightmares could produce a troubled child. In the last of those dreams, a dream just before dawn, my uncle appeared. My sisters and aunts did not turn from a long counter where they prepared a feast. He would not tell me why he came, but I know why he comes. Before my father died, he dreamt, and so did I, of how this uncle came for him. He led my father up a path in the woods beyond the hospital. My father followed silently uphill, an old man careful of his step. Your father, meditating in the dark downstairs, rose when I came down, your undulations prominent as seas against him. Gandhi was a troubled man, he said, and Jesus too, and Buddha. Later, on the nights you nursed, I rested my thumb above your smooth, pale brows. We lay thus when bad news came. My sister, widowed young, the sweet dream of my milk on your sleeping breath. We passed you around the funeral guests, a baby content to sleep on the shoulders of black sweaters. You woke unperturbed by strangers. Even now, satisfied to stand apart, unflustered by your people, you are their student nonetheless, who notices haircuts and tantrums, who catalogs for me the evidence of healing in their yellow bruises. You memorize the names of whole families we pass in the grocery store. You watch with eyes that are the changing greens and golds of one grandfather's turbulent Irish coast, the autumn valleys of another's Dolomites. At night, we lie on thin, cool sheets as you recount the day. The trek of inchworm up your naked arm, the fine web spun between the chains of swings. Today in school, you learn sign language for bear and octopus and swim. I'll teach you, you say, your white hands breaking the dark surface above your bed.
Tribute poem. Yeah. Very nice.
Thank you.
Do any of them have a love for poetry?
Do any of my girls have a love for poetry? Athena does. Athena took a poetry class in college, and she reads poetry. The other two are artistic. My oldest daughter is a fashion designer, a very artsy kid, and the youngest one is, they have their artistic strengths,
Nice.
but no poets. Is that a good or bad thing? I don't know. Some days.
I don't think there can be enough poets in the world. So obviously we're experiencing a worldwide shortage. So no, only good. I know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when you get those rejections just keep flowing in, you're kind of glad you're not nursing your kids through that. That's for sure. All right. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to find another poem. What do we have here? 123. So we're almost done.
Yeah.
Do you want me to read a little bit of the memoir?
Sure, whatever you want to do. I mean, listen,
All right. So here,
Kathy Haley knows we are so structured. We cannot veer from our agenda. I don't even know if we ever had an agenda when we started. So no, all good to go.
okay. I'm just going to read just one. This is like a page and a half.
Hey, Carla, there was a question. Where was that poem for Afia? What book was it in?
Where did it appear?
Or is that a new one?
That is not a new one. That's in the my first collection of poetry. This is one of the Similaries.
Okay.
Yeah. So my dad, one of the things about my dad is he raised a very famous bull. He was kind of a famous farmer. So I'm going to read just part of this. It's called one of the chapters called Bull Stories. A Holstein bull, Holsteins are the black and white ones. A Holstein bull weighs 2,400 pounds. His front legs appear shortened, an optical illusion caused by the bulk of his upper body that spans from his massive brisket to the rounded withers that rise to over 6 feet. Rather than the lean females he breeds, his body is extra flesh and muscle. He is granite-headed, thick-necked. A generous dewlap hangs below his jaw. His pendulous testicles swing to his hocks. His penis, normally encased in a sheath from which sprout several long hairs stained with urine, is 3 feet long. As a calf, he is as winsome as his sisters, long-lashed, big-eyed, a soft tuft of hair sprouting over his poll. He is born to dominate. Removed from his mother, bottle-fed by humans, and isolated once he becomes unpredictable, he will seek to assert dominance the way, if he had been allowed to free range, he would have taken on other behemoths. He will use his pair of pointed horns like a pitchfork to toss you, then pick you up and toss you again. He'll plant his senseless forehead against your spine and shove you hard against surfaces, stomp on you just in case you've survived the assault so far. You don't keep a full-grown bull around once his temperament begins to change, unless you are my father. As a young man, my father milked in the stanchion barn, maybe sang O Sole Mio. Singing was the happiest he ever sounded. He had a strong baritone. He only used it at night, alone at night, never in the morning, milking his cows. The rest of the farm sleepy, spent from a grueling day. But that night, boards crashing in the distance interrupted his performance. His hearing was good then. He stopped to listen. Out by the old sheep pasture, he had been building the chicken coop, and the sound drifted from there. The only explanation for that much noise, the bull was loose. Even in those days, years before he could accuse me of misplacing them, we had no flashlights. My father set off to catch the bull in the dark, marching down the laneway toward the building site and stopping in front of the dump truck parked there. Behind the truck, capable of hauling a load of hay or 3 adult cows, stood the bull. When the bull saw my father, he put his head down and lifted the truck off its rear tires. Shook it like a leaf, he said. He loved that part of the story. These are dangerous animals, Carla, my mother would tell me once he'd finished the retelling and left us alone in the house. Don't forget that. It was not up to her to validate him. Her job was to protect me, but I was his audience, and the image of the truck body hoisted by that fantastic creature, his thick legs wide-spaced, his nostrils flaring, impressed me. It made my mother angry at a man who took unnecessary risks, whose decisions she so often had no voice in. My father would have felt no fear facing that bull alone, only a combination of wonder and admiration. He kept a full-grown bull for the same reason most farmers didn't, because they were to be respected. He refused to dehorn them, so their horns stretched to lethal points. They lived in the barn's corner pen, giants who glared at anyone who wandered by. It's foolish to keep them, my mother said. They could kill a man. Only my father's most famous bull, Ivanhoe, had not resided in that space because a bull stud had bought him and moved him to Pennsylvania. But long after that bull was gone and his daughters had died, people at fairs and cattle conventions approached my father and said, "You're Aldo Panciera, aren't you? Always wanted to meet you." If they noticed me at all, they said, "You must be Aldo's daughter." "Mine too," my mother would say after people walked away.
Wow.
Thank
Have
you
a bull
so
pick up
much.
the truck. Yeah. That's childhood. Yeah.
This was really fun. I just want to say, I didn't say this, but thank you everybody for tuning in on your lunch break. And I wish I had known this was happening during COVID. I would love to have spent my COVID lunches here.
Well, everyone can go to the YouTube for the Stockbridge Library and see all the past shows. So we record everything. So that's pretty cool. No, listen, Carla, this has been a tremendous joy. It really has. No, really, don't laugh, don't laugh. I mean, the bull, whatever. I'm not going to mention that word, but anything like that that's 3 foot long is what is that,
Sorry.
like a javelin or something instead of yeah. That's your childhood. Your childhood was there were a lot of strange creatures and images in your childhood, and yeah, from the Winstons in the bathroom to the bull with the javelin. Yeah. No, really, it's a lot of. Listen, this has been so much.
I know. I'm sorry. I should have probably given you a warning, but
No, it's all good. I'm probably not going to get that out of my mind for about 8 hours. I'll be looking at a street sign. Wait, you think it was longer than the street sign, or is it like yeah. Obviously, Kathy, I need stuff to do instead of looking at things like that. So
don't look it up on the internet. My God, people seize your computer.
yeah, that's it. Yeah. No, listen, thank you again. A fantastic reading and to share your work and some of your stories. It's all really nice. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.